You remember the moment you stopped talking, not because there was nothing left to say, but because you realized no one was listening. They were scanning for weakness, not meaning, not truth, just your tells. The flicker in your eye, the break in your breath, the tone shift that betrayed your self-worth. So you fell silent. And in that silence, something strange happened. The world stopped spinning so fast, and people revealed themselves. You began to see it. Not what they said, but what they didn't control. The tension behind their compliments, the envy behind their curiosity, the need behind their kindness, and the contempt behind their advice. You weren't crazy. You were just too loud to notice. And they liked it that way, because the louder you were, the more they could read you, predict you, use you. Now you're quiet. Now they're unsettled. And now they're trying to break the silence. Because they can feel what you've become. They can feel you watching. Not emotionally, not reactively. Strategically. Detached. Unmoved. That's what this world doesn't teach you. Power isn't in the words. It's in the pause before them. It's in what you withhold, what you don't explain, what you see and don't react to. The weak speak, the strong wait. The dangerous watch. You don't need permission to be this version of yourself. Just precision, just distance, just a memory of how much it cost you to be soft. And if you felt it, if you've been discarded for your honesty, mocked for your kindness, punished for your peace, then you're not here to heal. You're here to evolve. This is not inspiration. This is war strategy for the mind. And the first rule is this: stay silent. Observe everything. Comment when the silence taught you more than words ever did. Subscribe if you're ready to stop being read and start becoming unreadable. They thought your silence was weakness. That's the first illusion you let them believe. Because fools assume that noise is strength. That presence means movement. That if you're not reacting, you're not a threat. Let them underestimate you. That's where real leverage is built beneath the surface, under the radar, where no one thinks to look. You used to explain yourself. Every emotion, every decision, every shift in mood, because you thought understanding would protect you. It didn't. They didn't want understanding. They wanted access, and you gave it to them. You gave them the map to your mind, hoping they'd use it to meet you. But they used it to manipulate you. The more you revealed, the more they rehearsed. The more you trusted, the more they twisted. And the more you tried to be clear, the more they blurred your reality, until you started feeling crazy in conversations, defensive in your own truth, powerless in your own story. You weren't crazy. You were just in the wrong arena, trying to win with integrity against people playing for control. So you stopped. Not because you were defeated, because you were done playing their game. That's when everything changed. You stopped asking people what they meant. You started watching how they moved. You stopped telling people who you are. You started showing them what silence does to them. They started filling the gaps, projecting, over-explaining, shifting, because you created space for their own conscience to echo, and it rattled them. You stopped trying to look strong and started becoming unreadable, and that made you untouchable. People fear what they can't predict, and now they don't know how to prepare for you. They don't know if you're calm or calculating. They don't know if you're healed or hiding. They don't know if you're watching to forgive or to strike. You know what power is? It's not status. It's not volume. It's the ability to sit in a room and make others feel seen without ever saying a word. That's the law. Cold observation is not about distance. It's about discipline. To see without being pulled. To know without being known. To understand without needing to respond. Because once you master that, you no longer react to disrespect. You register it, catalog it, and move accordingly. No explosions, no warnings, just adjustments. They think you don't notice. They think they got away with it. Let them. They'll feel the shift before they understand it. You were never soft. You were just surrounded by people who needed you to believe you were. Because as long as you doubted your edge, they could dull it, make you second-guess what you saw, convince you that your instincts were wrong, that your standards were too high, that your silence was immaturity, not intelligence. But silence is not immaturity. Silence is surveillance. And once you learn how to watch without needing to be seen, you start seeing everything. Watch how people treat you when you no longer entertain them, when you no longer chase the conversation, when you no longer offer clarity for their confusion. Watch how fast the mask slips. You thought they cared. You thought they were kind. But the moment you withheld your energy, your validation, your emotional labor, they turned cold. And in that cold, you met their real self. That's why silence is sacred. Because it's where the truth reveals itself unprompted. You don't need to test people. You don't need to provoke them. You just need to stop giving. And watch who gets uncomfortable. Some people only feel powerful when they have access to your emotions. When they can make you react, cry, doubt, apologize, defend. But when you offer nothing, when you give them silence instead of a defense, they unravel. Because now, they can't control you. Now, they have to face themselves. And here's what most people don't realize. The moment you stopped explaining yourself, you became a mirror. And most people hate mirrors, because they reflect things they're not ready to admit. That's why they'll call you cold, distant, arrogant, uncaring. But you're not uncaring. You've just stopped offering your care to people who feed off your confusion. You're not distant. You're just done being emotionally available to chaos. You're not arrogant. You've just realized your silence holds more power than their performance. Let them think they've won. Let them think you're over it, moved on, indifferent. You don't need to correct the narrative. You've outgrown the need to be understood by people who depend on misunderstanding you. From now on, your presence is earned. Your clarity is reserved. Your silence is your weapon. And if that makes people nervous, good. Let them feel what it's like to not know where they stand with you. Because for once, you're not the one chasing certainty. You're the one creating it. They used to love the version of you that bled for connection. The one that explained every silence, softened every edge, overcompensated for their discomfort, made yourself smaller just to make the moment feel safe. But that version of you was a transaction, not a person, a service, a role, a script written by people who needed you to stay manageable. You were predictable. You were controllable. You were digestible. But the moment you stopped feeding their ego, the moment you stopped being useful to their insecurities, you became too much, too cold, too quiet, too focused, too hard to read. Good. You're not supposed to be read. You're not a book. You're the author. And they don't get a preview anymore. They have to live with the silence. Here's the law you live by now. You give people space to show you who they are when you're no longer easy to exploit. And that space? It terrifies them. Because your silence doesn't just remove their control. It reveals it was all they ever had. They're not mad because you're gone. They're mad because you left them with themselves. And they can't perform in silence. They can't twist what you don't say. They can't manipulate what you don't react to. So they crumble, or they rage, or they beg. Not for you, but for your attention. Because attention was the only way they measured their value. And now that it's gone, they have to confront the void they always hid beneath the noise. That's what silence does. It burns. It confronts. It exposes. You no longer need closure. You are closure. Because you didn't walk away for revenge. You didn't disappear to punish. You did it because the game was over. And you were never playing to begin with. Now you're still. Note passive. Still like a blade resting on the table. Visible. Untouched. Deadly. If provoked. You're not looking for battles. But you're never unarmed. Let them wonder what you're thinking. Let them fear what you're capable of. Let them talk in circles while you sit in silence. You owe no one a response. Only consequences. They'll say you've changed. That's how they try to shame you for evolving, because who you are now no longer serves who they pretended to be. You used to fill every silence, rush to resolve every tension, smooth every crack in the connection, no matter how fake the surface. You mistook peacekeeping for loyalty, but all you did was teach people they could lie to your face and still be comforted by your presence. Not anymore. Now, when something feels off, you don't ask. You don't explain. You don't fix. You feel it. You clock it. You file it. That's the shift. You don't expose what you see. You let them think they're still fooling you, because people reveal more when they believe they're safe in your silence. They don't understand that your calm is not forgiveness. It's evidence collection. Every contradiction, every micro-betrayal, every misaligned word. You see it, and instead of confronting them, you withdraw access. Quietly, permanently. That's what unnerves them, not the confrontation. The lack of it. Because confrontation means they still matter. Silence means they're irrelevant, and there's no coming back from that. Now you watch patterns, not promises. You respect energy, not excuses. You listen to your nervous system, not their explanations. Because once you learn how to sit in silence, you hear the lies people tell themselves and try to sell you as truth. They call you cold, number. You're calibrated, measured, focused. And the reason they can't reach you now is because you finally see what they were hiding behind the noise. Their approval meant nothing. Their love came with conditions. Their kindness was currency. And the moment you stopped paying, they stopped pretending. You didn't lose them. You lost the illusion. And you replaced it with clarity. That's what silence gives you. Not just peace. Precision. So keep watching. Keep listening. Say less, mean more, because the less they know what you're thinking, the more power you have over what they reveal. This is how you become untouchable, not by building walls, but by mastering stillness. Not frozen, just unreadable. They had your emotions once. They'll never have your mind. Most people think power is taken, that it requires force, aggression, domination, but real power is simpler. It's the discipline to do nothing. Nothing when they provoke you. Nothing when they bait you. Nothing when they beg for a reaction to validate their chaos. You sit there, still, unmoving, not because you're numb, but because you already saw it coming. They play checkers. You count moves in silence. You knew they'd test your boundaries. You knew they'd disguise control as concern. You knew they'd try to pull you back with fake apologies wrapped in self-pity. And still, you let them come. You let them talk. You gave them just enough rope. And when they revealed themselves, you didn't scream. You didn't cry. You didn't explain. You just watched, then walked, without a single word to hold on to. That's power. Not in how you leave, but in how little of yourself you leave behind. They used to feast on your reactivity. They called it conversation, but it was always extraction. They never wanted your truth. They wanted your emotional labor, your energy, your defense, your breakdowns. Now, they get none of it. Now they talk to silence. They scream into a void that used to answer. They perform for a mirror that no longer moves. That's the consequence they never calculated. That silence would cost them more than your presence ever did. And here's the part they'll never admit. They respected you more the moment you stopped explaining yourself. Because deep down, even the most manipulative people fear one thing, a person they can't predict. Someone who doesn't argue, doesn't defend, doesn't flinch. Someone who smiles with no emotion behind it, listens with no intent to forgive, leaves with no announcement. That's who you are now. Not bitter, not broken, just beyond reach. You've outgrown emotional negotiation. You've outgrown performative peace. You've outgrown the need to prove your worth to people who only valued your wounds. Let them gossip. Let them guess. Let them spin narratives to feel powerful, because the truth is colder than any rumor. You saw it all and chose silence over revenge, distance over drama, detachment over destruction. Not because you're afraid, but because you're done playing with people who think they win by making you bleed. You don't bleed anymore. You watch. You record. You disappear. That's the new law. They only respect the version of you that doesn't need them, not because they admire it, but because they can't control it. And that's what this has always been about. Not love, not loyalty, not misunderstanding. Control. And you were the perfect target. Empathetic, patient, always trying to understand where they're coming from. You thought clarity would fix the chaos. It didn't. It just trained them to use confusion as leverage. The more disoriented you became, the easier you were to guilt, to gaslight, to shape, until one day you stopped asking questions, stopped clarifying, stopped negotiating with double meanings and hidden jabs. And in that silence, they met someone new, not the version they could manipulate, but the version that watches without blinking. You didn't become this way overnight. It was death by 1,000 cuts. Every lie you forgave, every insult you let slide, every boundary you bent because you didn't want to seem difficult. But you finally realized being difficult is only a problem for people who benefit from your compliance. So now you sit in silence, not as a defense, but as a message. You're not waiting. You're not confused. You're not emotional. You're gathering data, because silence isn't passive. It's strategic. Every person who walks into your life now walks into a mirror. And what they project, you record, not to respond, but to decide. Are they aligned or opportunistic? Are they consistent or just good at pretending? Are they loyal or just afraid to lose access? Because you've learned, most people don't connect. They attach. And attachment is not intimacy. It's a leash. They say the quietest person in the room is the most dangerous. Not because they're plotting, but because they've already seen the outcome. They're just waiting for you to reveal which version of yourself is real. And when you do, they won't argue. They won't debate. They won't correct you. They'll just disappear. Without noise. Without announcement. Because they don't chase validation. They move in final decisions. You've become that. Unreadable. Unshakable. Unreachable to anything that doesn't meet your level of emotional precision. Let the world talk. You'll be watching. You don't flinch anymore. And that terrifies them. Because now they have nothing to hold over you. No guilt to exploit. No wound to poke. No reaction to harvest. They test you. You blink slowly. They accuse you. You stay seated. They try to provoke what used to break you. And all they meet is silence. Not emptiness. Precision. You don't just see the games now. You see the need beneath them. The desperation. The emotional poverty masked as confidence. The performance of strength collapsing the moment you stop playing your role. You were never supposed to be their therapist, their parent, their audience. You were supposed to be yourself, but they couldn't handle that. Because your clarity made them feel exposed. So they blamed your standards. They called it selfish, difficult, unreasonable. But here's the truth. They choke on every time they try to rewrite the story. You didn't leave because you stopped caring. You left because you started caring about yourself more than the illusion of the connection. You stopped auditioning, stopped performing emotional labor, stopped being the scaffolding that held up fragile egos. Now, you walk differently. Not faster, just sharper. You listen with your eyes. You trust patterns, not promises. You speak rarely because most conversations are just people managing perception, not revealing truth. And that's the Machiavellian part of you they didn't expect. Not cruel, not dishonest, just ruthlessly observant. You give people the space to show themselves, and they always do. Eventually, desperately, uncontrollably. They talk too much when you're quiet. They confess things you didn't ask. They project things you never implied. Because silence isn't just presence, it's pressure. And under pressure, the masks crack. The tone shifts. The need leaks out. The lies stretch thin. You don't confront. You just disappear. Because when people show you who they are, you believe them the first time now. Not emotionally. Strategically. You don't need closure. They'll replay the silence every night until they understand what it meant. You already do. They always return. Not because they miss you. Not because they changed. But because silence created a vacuum they can't live with. They didn't think you'd stay quiet. They thought it was a tactic. A phase. Apu. They assumed you'd come back with a justification, a plea, a desperate need to be seen. But you never came back. Because you didn't need to be seen. You needed to see. And now you have. You saw what your absence revealed. How quickly the story changed. How fast they replaced loyalty with revision. How their true feelings only surfaced when they thought you weren't coming back. And that's when the truth hit you. You were never loved. You were leveraged. That's the part no one wants to admit. That love, in the wrong hands, is a tool. And you were a tool that stopped working. So they discarded you until they needed the function again. Now they circle back. With softness. With stories. With carefully crafted nostalgia designed to reopen the door. But you've learned. They don't miss you. They miss the access. They miss being able to read you, affect you, control the emotional thermostat of your day. And silence? Silence made them powerless. So they test. They send half-hearted messages wrapped in jokes or sentiment. They pretend they forgot something. They try to trigger a memory. They hope for a crack. But you don't give them cracks. You give them stone. No bitterness. No drama. Just impenetrable calm. Because once you learn how to observe without attachment, you realize most apologies are strategies. Most reconnections are traps. Most people don't miss you. They miss what you did for their ego. You don't owe anyone a reopening. You don't need to clarify your silence. The strongest move is not closure. It's indifference. And that's what they fear most. Not that you're angry, but that you're done. They wanted control. They got a mirror. And mirrors don't bend. They reflect. They'll stare into it for years, trying to find the version of you that used to respond. But that version doesn't live here anymore. He died the day you realized that peace is more valuable than proving your point. You walk into rooms differently now. Not louder. Not with presence you have to prove. Just unreadable. Because the old version of you chased clarity. This version creates it. You don't ask what people mean. You watch what they repeat. You don't look for signs. You read patterns like sentences. You don't need reassurance. Because you already decided if you have to ask, it's already broken. That's what the silence taught you. Not how to hide, but how to see without needing to be seen. How to choose without the need to explain. How to detach without resentment. You were never cold. They just never expected you to develop discipline. They knew how to manage your emotions, but they never expected you to weaponize your observation. That's what changed the game. You no longer wait for people to become who they pretend to be. You give them space, and they either rise to meet your stillness or crumble in the absence of your emotional crutch. And either way, you lose nothing. Because now you know, silence doesn't mean absence. It means dominance. You don't beg for truth. You create the environment that forces it to surface. And when it does, you act. Without ceremony. Without explanation. Without emotional residue. You cut quietly. You leave surgically. You become unforgettable, not because you stayed, but because of how you left, without malice, without mess. Just the cold, clean removal of your energy from every space that didn't know what to do with it. And long after you're gone, they'll still talk about your silence. Because it echoed louder than any speech you could have given. It wasn't revenge. It was revelation. They weren't ready for who you became when you stopped needing to be heard. They're still not. And they'll keep reaching, testing, guessing, trying to provoke the old version of you to come back and react. But you don't react anymore. You calibrate. You adjust. You vanish with precision. Because once you see the truth in silence, words become irrelevant. And now, so do they.